Hello, and welcome to episode 65 of Gondor Calls for Ale, a Middle-earth strategy battle games podcast. I am your host, Sam Gallagher, and with me in this episode is my brother Ben.
Hello, listeners and viewers. Welcome back to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, welcome back to what will be a more standard episode of Gondor Calls for Ale, I think, this time. Which, of course, Ben, the most standard, most Gondor, most ale thing of any Gondor Calls for Ale show is, of course, the beer. So what are you drinking this fine afternoon?
Well, Sam, for this episode, I have myself a Brago's Brown Ale. This beer is kingly. What about you, Sam? What are you drinking for this episode?
Well, Ben, I'm having a Bull Roarer's beer, which is, of course, a beer brought to you by the Hobbit that brought you golf.
Nice. Both drinking beer out of a mug today, I see.
Yes, well, sometimes when you're down to the last clean things to drink out of,
Right.
it's a mug. All right, so what are we talking about in this episode, Ben? We are talking about your attendance to the return once more into
the Paths of the Dead. Yeah.
Once more into the return to the Paths of the Dead, which was a 750 point tournament.
Yes.
Held somewhere in your neck of the woods a little while ago at this point. When we're recording and releasing this episode, but some more potentially relevant and or exciting stuff had happened that we wanted to get an episode out for. This should have been the previous episode. This should have been episode 64, but we decided that people would be more excited to hear Sam's correct thoughts and Ben's slightly less correct thoughts about the legacy profiles sooner rather than later. So that's why this is being delayed.
I should note, too, Sam, that I want to correct you. It's a 700-point tournament, not 750 points.
Well, I did the 10, so I'm okay with having gotten that wrong. But 700 points. All right, Ben, should we take it away?
Let's take it away. And I, of course, forgot to put my army list into the slideshow, so I'm just going to go through it while we're looking at our sweet Gondor Calls for Ale logo. I'll describe it for you, Sam, or maybe I'll bring it up.
Perfect.
So, I was sallying forth to the Paths of the Dead with the Riders of Theoden once again, but we wanted to do things a little bit differently. I wanted to stick with the Riders of Theoden that was a little more inspired by what we actually get from in the books. So we started off with Theoden, King of Rohan. He's on an armored horse with shield and heavy armor. In his warband, there is one rider of Rohan with banner and throwing spears. That is the King's banner bearer, Guthlath, which Tolkien names, and Games Workshop were like, nope, Gamling gets the banner. Anyway, and then we've got 6 Royal Guard with throwing spear. In the next warband, we've got Deowine, Chief of the King's Knights with 6 Royal Guard and throwing spear. And in our final warband, we have Elfhelm, Captain of Rohan. In his warband, there is Dernhelm with throwing spears, 7 Riders of Rohan, and 1 Rider of Rohan with throwing spears. So we've got a total of 26 models, all of them cavalry, which is quite a lot of cavalry at 700 points for the Riders of Theoden.
Yeah, so your more themed version of this is you don't take a character you don't really like taking, and you just give up gambling and have a few more dudes.
Gave up gambling, gave up Éomer.
Right, which you have oft said that you think Éomer is a trap and you don't like taking him.
Oh, yeah, but I love taking him. He just never does well for me. Yeah. And then we didn't have all Royal Guard. It could have been all Royal Guard, Sam, but we've got 9 Riders of Rohan in there. So, you know.
Sure.
Slightly more themed. Left the real big hitters at home. Left the free might at home. I see you there grinning, Sam. I see you grinning.
Just saying, it's whatever. I won't let you get away with that shit in the new edition. Is what I'm saying, man.
No, you don't like my more thematic Riders of Theoden.
I don't
think. Just gone for 6,000 Riders of Rohan.
I mean, I hope they fix the difference between Royal Guard and Riders, because now there is not much point in taking a Rider. And
I will say, in most of my games, I felt somewhat punished for, punished may be the wrong word, but I was definitely like, if these guys were Royal Guard, they would be a lot better.
Sure, yeah. I don't know. It just kind of feels like essentially the same. I don't know. I would be more into you taking this army and making it whatever X other whoever Theoden's dad is and be like, oh, I'm going to convert up the army and I'm going to, that's how I'm going to make an army that's a pretty strong competitive army, and obviously different because you've got more models and stuff, but a potential army that can be like pretty unfun to play against, themed by I went for some different era in Rohan, but whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely, all cavalry is definitely not the most fun thing to play against. You're definitely right there. But I do think my opponents enjoyed this a little bit more because I got so many warrior models that I was just taking horses off left, right, and center, which was hopefully nice for my opponents.
Yeah.
All right, Sam. Onwards into my first game. I was fighting against Brandon. And this was the veto system, and we ended up playing Lords of Battle, which is Scenario 4.
All right, Scenario 4, Lords of Battle. Obviously, if you're viewing, you can see the beautiful 24-inch up deployment zones, and if you're listening, I am, of course, actively describing it to you, so no box needed. We have a game that lasts until one force has been broken, and then it may suddenly end on a 1 or a 2. We've got some scoring victory points. For this scenario, keep track of your wound tally. Your wound tally is equal to the number of wounds that your army inflicted on your opponent's army, plus any fate points that your opponent spent. Hero models that are removed from the game with unspent fate will add 1 to the wound tally for each 1 unspent. Models that flee because their force is broken count towards the wound tally, but mounts do not. You score 3 victory points if your wound tally is greater than your opponent. You score 5 if your wound tally is twice as big as your opponent's, and 7 if it's 3 times. You score 1 victory point for causing 1 or more wounds to the enemy leader, 2 if you kill them, and you score 1 victory point if the enemy force is broken at the end of the game. If the enemy force is broken and yours is not, instead you score 3. And then we've got some special rules, Ben, which is, of course, the time of heroes. Each time your force kills an enemy hero in a fight, one of your hero models in the same fight, your choice, regains a single point of might lost earlier in the battle.
I completely forgot about that for this game.
As one always does. I think that is the biggest takeaway from Lords of Battle, is that it's a pretty cool special rule that nobody ever remembers.
Yep. So I was playing against Brandon. We were playing on a sweet Rohan board, which was brought by Matt Iverson. I quite like this board. And he was playing a Lothlorien Rohan alliance led by Galadriel with Theodred and Dernhelm in support.
I already hate it.
And they are green allies, which never made any sense to me, but there you go. And so, Sam, we will get right on into it. On turn 1, you can see how Brandon's deployed here. He's got his battle line, which is a mix of elf warriors, Galadrim Guard with the pikes and the Fight 6, and the front line is basically all warriors of Rohan, a handful of Royal Guard, but mostly just the warriors there. He's got a couple, I think 1 mounted Royal Guard, and then Theodred and Dernhelm for his cavalry forces. And I didn't really like the idea of charging into that spear wall with it anchored between the 2 buildings like that, so I decided I was going to go round the back of one of the buildings. Galadriel channeled or cast Blinding Light on turn 1 and fails. I get some throwing spears, throws, don't get any kills, but lose a horse. Brandon had a couple of outwalkers of Rohan who were hiding behind this cart. You can see on the table there, and those guys never missed a shot all game. They never killed anyone. They slew many, many horses. So we got, and of course, horse wounds do count for Lords of the Battle kill tally. So Brandon got 1 wound at this turn. I take turn 2 priority as well, and we start to push our cavalry round the flank. I kind of mucked up my deployment here, or my movement here, I think. I was focusing on hiding from the bows because they stressed me out. I'd taken some horse casualties. I didn't want to take any more. And as you can see, my flanking maneuver doesn't actually have line of sight around the back, which turned out to punish me a little bit there. Because in his turn, Brandon compels Elfhelm with Galadriel. Elfhelm fails. He's only got 1 point of will, fails to resist, and is then surrounded on that flank. I had moved him out there. He was going to do some throwing spear shenanigans. Super excited to put Elfhelm on the table. I'd been up late last night painting him the night before, and on turn 2, it looked like he was about to be just completely clobbered. I take another casualty this turn and suffer a couple more horse casualties in the combat phase. Elfhelm manages to survive. He spends a point of fate to save it. He loses the fight, obviously. There's some fight 6 elves over there. He's only fight 4. He spends a point of fate to keep himself on his horse, which is probably not the right call, but I didn't have the dismount painted, and like I said, I just spent all of Friday painting this model, so I wanted to keep him on the board for as long as possible. And then he takes another wound and still loses his horse. So Elfhelm is dismounted, but is alive, with still all 3 points of his might, which was pretty interesting. Turn 3 goes to me, and because of the way I positioned last turn, I wasn't really able to run in too many people to support Elfhelm. I did throw a couple of Royal Guard, I think 4, into the front of his spear wall, because basically I've got enough warriors, I can afford to lose some warriors in this army, and I wanted to sort of pin that spear wall in place while the rest of my army got around this Rohan house. In the fight phase, we got a bloody turn. I managed to get 4 kills this turn, but between slain horses, shooting, fate save. No, I don't think I took any fate off of heroes here. I take a total of 9 wounds this turn, so not a good turn for me. But that is all okay. I continue to win all the priorities. I take turn 4 priority, and we get a move off between Galadriel and Elfhelm. And Elfhelm managed to move first this turn. Theodred last turn rode up to try and back up that flank. And on this turn, we go, no father should have to bury his children, Sam. But Theoden's going to do it anyway. So Theoden charges into Theodred. You can see Theodred in the middle there. He gets backed up by Daelwine and a bunch of the King's Knights, and Elfhelm goes in as well. Meanwhile, Eowyn manages to dismount off of her horse and charge into Galadriel. I don't think I'm going to win that fight, but it is good to pin Galadriel down, right? She's casting magic, throwing spells at me. I call Death this turn. And manage to close the kill gap. I get 7 kills this turn and don't take a single casualty. That's what we like to see out of the death turn. And of course, Theodred is absolutely butchered by his dad and friends. And then we get into turn 5, which is, of course, the last turn of the game. This game ends on time. Oops, out of pictures there. Get into turn 5. I take another priority and sort of basically relock, lines re-engage. Galadriel calls a heroic combat, which is kind of interesting here. It doesn't go off. Eowyn manages to win that fight. She's just shielded against Galadriel. She got into. They ended up fighting again this turn. Theoden botches his roll. He's trapped against the board edge, surrounded by, I think, some elves, mounted Royal Guard. Botches his combat roll, and takes a wound and a point of fate, which was a bit unfortunate for Theoden. And this game wraps up with a 5-0 loss to Brandon. Brandon's win, 0 victory points to me, 5 for him. I think if it had gone on a couple more turns, I actually would have won this one because his Durnhelm was also dismounted, and I think she was fairly low on might. I've got might on most of my heroes, and so that leaves Galadriel with 2 might left on the board. And if we actually count up the kill tally in this one, I was only, I think, 2 wounds behind by the end of this turn.
Gotcha.
So a fun game. I love playing Brandon. I played him. This will be my 3rd time playing him at Paths of the Dead, and the first time that he's won. So we had a good time. A great game. Not a whole lot that I have to say about this game, really.
Well, excellent. Yeah, I look forward to that army not existing in a few short months.
Indeed. Which brings us on into round 2, where I played against Jimmy, and we were playing Assassination.
That 18, right? Scenario 18 sure is.
Scenario 18, yep.
Inch up deployment zones. Another game that might suddenly end after a force has been broken. So on a 1 or a 2 after a force has been broken, it will end. Another game with scoring victory points. You score 1 victory point. Oh, I guess I should talk about the special rules first. The target at the start of the game, secretly note down one of your opponent's heroes. This is your target for the game. You may not be your opponent's leader unless they only have 1 hero. And then you have the assassin at the start of the game secretly note down one of your hero models. That is your assassin. This may not be your leader unless you only have one hero. Then you score 1 victory point if your target has suffered 1 or more wounds. If your target has suffered 1 or more wounds and your assassin caused at least 1 wound, instead you score 3. If your target has been slain, instead you score 5. If your target has been slain and the assassin caused a fatal wound, instead you score 7. You score 1 victory point for causing 1 or more wounds to the enemy leader. If you kill them instead, you score 2. You score 1 victory point if the enemy force has been broken at the end of the game. The enemy force is broken and your force is unbroken. Instead, you score 3 victory points.
All right, and Jimmy was playing an alliance of Minas Tirith with the fiefdoms. So his army leader is Denethor, and then we have Boromir and Thorlong the Fat. And we're playing on a cool Osgiliath board. My assassin, I picked Dernhelm as my assassin because she's got 3 attacks. I kind of, looking back at this game, wish that I had picked Daewine. I think that it would have been slightly better. But anyway, onwards, Sam, onwards into the game. Jimmy takes turn 1 priority. I think this picture here is taken at around turn 2 or turn 3. And we essentially just move up. We get a couple of shots this turn. And I take 1 casualty. You can see, if you look at where he's deployed his army in this picture, you can see the warriors in red there off to the left. That was where the bulk of his army deployed. I had set up in front of that L-shaped white ruin and then swept around to the flank because, again, I didn't want to charge into a spear wall that in this case outfights me or ties me for fight that is anchored between 2 buildings. We wanted to get around the side. And then I also... Boromir was my assassination target, right? I can't pick Denethor. I probably could have picked Forlong, but he seems like the obvious choice and seems relatively easy to keep Forlong safe. And if you can kill Boromir, then I think the army falls apart. Denethor will go crazy. The banner effect is gone. So I was like, screw it. All the eggs in one basket. Let's try and kill Boromir. So I set out some Boromir bait. We don't want Boromir hanging out behind his shield wall. We want him out in the front so that we can charge him. So I put... Dernhelm and Elfhelm way out in front of my army within charge range of Boromir. It was like, hey, bring it on, come get him. I didn't actually expect Jimmy to charge them, but you can see here that's exactly what he did. He's thrown Boromir straight on in. So this is turn 2, and in the fight phase on turn 2, we get a strike off between. Between Boromir and Dernhelm, and a heroic combat off between Elfhelm and Forlong. I think Elfhelm essentially wanted to call his heroic combat so that he could not be trapped and run away. If you look at where he is, Sam, he's all the way in Jimmy's deployment zone on the north end of the board there in front of that brown building. And what I wanted to do with him was call a heroic combat and then ride around the flank and throw throwing spears at Denethor all game, because I thought that could be quite fun, chucking throwing spears at Denethor with Elfhelm. Unfortunately, Forlong's heroic combat goes first, and he charges into Elfhelm. Elfhelm's heroic combat goes next. Elfhelm manages to win the fight against Forlong, which is unlikely. I've got the low fight. He was already in combat with someone else, so he didn't have enough dice. I was low on dice. I only had the 2 dice, but we don't manage to wound Forlong. But the strike-off between Eowyn and Boromir. Boromir gets a 5 on a strike, Eowyn only gets a 3, so the fight goes to Boromir, and Eowyn is slain this turn, which was like, should not have made her my assassin, that was a mistake. Or if I had made her, I shouldn't have used her as bait. So, that's okay though, we still got a plan. Boromir is still out of position, which is what I was trying to go for here. I take turn 3 priority, and we get a move off between Forlong and Elfhelm. And the move goes to Forlong. And we re-engage. Battle lines move up. Horses charge in. We throw Theoden, and I think we manage to get Daewine into Boromir as well. Elfhelm is trapped and surrounded. Merry is, of course, on foot now because Eowyn has been slain. And I decide that this is the time to call death. So we get Theoden calls a strike, Daewine calls a strike, Elfhelm decides to call a combat because why not? And Merry also decides to call a combat because you never know, Sam.
Sure.
In the fight phase, we get the strike-off between Theoden and Boromir, and the fight goes to Theoden. Theoden wins the fight, has to spend a point of might. Boromir only got a 2 on his strike. Theoden wins the fight, has to spend a point of might to win that fight, and takes 2 points of fate off of Boromir. So quite pleased with that from Theoden there. Merry, somewhat unsurprisingly, fails his heroic combat, and Elfhelm does manage to kill a couple of guys, but doesn't have anywhere to go. All right, turn 4 goes to me. We get another move off, this time between Boromir and Daewine. The move off goes to Boromir, and this is where it all starts to fall apart for me. Because, cavalry have charged, we've lost the move off, and now the warriors of Minas Tirith are hitting back. In the combat phase, Theoden's been tied up by just some regular warriors. Boromir goes into Daewine. We get a strike-off between Boromir and Daewine, which, of course, Boromir wins. He only strikes to a 2, getting him to fight 9. Daewine strikes to a 4, getting him to fight 9. We get a tight fight. The roll-off goes to Boromir, and Boromir turns around and just kills Daewine this turn. And from here, the game pretty much just falls apart for me. That last turn, I think, or that move-off was my chance to get back in the driving seat and stay in the driving seat for this game. Losing the move off and then losing Daewine was pretty bad for me. Over the next couple of turns, I will say this was a good one as far as not taking too many casualties. We were both taking about 3 casualties a turn. So although he outnumbers me, there is the potential for my cavalry to do some damage here. On turn 4, we lose Merry and Elfhelm, which just leaves Theoden left for turn 5. I am broken at the end of turn 5, and the game ends on time with a 0-8 loss.
Bummer.
But a fun game. Like I said, I was pleased with my baiting of Boromir. I think that really worked well. I just used the wrong bait and then lost all the heroic move-offs, which, it's what happens. All cavalry armies don't like losing heroic move-offs, so I don't want to say that I, lost this game because I lost the heroic move-offs, but it definitely makes it difficult to come back from being on the back foot.
Yeah, fair enough.
Oh, so not looking good for our heroes at day 1, Sam, although I am having a good time. I think at this point I am fairly low down on the rankings, if not the bottom, near the bottom. For I, in round 3, was facing the tournament organizer and the ringer, Alex. We'll look at some more pictures of that game. And we ended up playing Reconnoiter, which was an interesting choice. I think I won the veto. We were playing out of the maneuvering pool. I won the veto and discarded Retrieval? No. It's Reconnoiter, Divide and Conquer, and... Anyway, I vetoed not Reconnoiter or Divide and Conquer, and then said to Alex, oh man, I always end up playing Divide and Conquer with the Riders of Theoden, and I really don't want to play that. And he was like, okay, let's play Reconnoiter. I don't know if he did that because he actually thought that it would be a better scenario for him, or if he was just like, I am the ringer, let's play the game that you want to play. So,
sure.
Reconnoiter.
All right. We have... Excuse me. We have a game, Ben. We have a game that lasts until one force has been reduced to 25% of its starting number. We have some victory points to be scored. You score 3 victory points if more of your models have escaped the battlefield via your opponent's board edge than your opponent. If you have at least 2 models and twice as many, you get 5. If you have 3 models and 3 times as many, you get 7. You score 1 victory point for causing 1 or more wounds to the enemy leader. If you kill them, instead you score 2. You score 1 victory point if the enemy force is broken, 3 if the enemy force is broken, and you are unbroken. And then we have some special rules, which is of course the reinforcement rules. At the end of your... So nobody deploys, basically. At the end of your move phase, roll a d6 for each of your warbands that are not set on the battlefield. And consult the chart below. Warband captains can adjust the might up and down. Basically, on a 1 to 3, the warband does not arrive, but receives +1 to this roll next turn. On a 4 to 6, the controlling player chooses a point on their table edge, at least 6 inches from a corner, and all the models walk onto the battlefield. So, a little bit weird one. You're trying to get models off your opponent's side while not having them on the battlefield at the same time. But also probably a pretty decent one, obviously depending what you're playing against, but overall, for an all cavalry army, this is one that's pretty easy to get at least a couple models off.
Yeah, absolutely, which is why I wasn't sure whether he picked this one because he liked it better or just because he was the ringer and was like, whatever scenario you want to play, man. Because for his ringer list, he had Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, and everybody that they met between the Shire and Rivendell. So we have Farmer Maggot and his 3 dogs. We've got Aragorn, Gildor, and some elves who are move 8, apparently.
Yeah.
Which is pretty saucy in Reconnoiter. I think there were about 10 of them. And then Glorfindel on Asphaleth with the heavy armor as well. Glorfindel is the army leader. So I actually outnumber him. There are only 23 models in his army. I take turn 1 priority. And Theoden takes up his mighty horse lord dice, green for the fields of Rohan with the right horse running on them. And he rolled that mighty horse lord dice, Sam, and threw a sweet 6.
All right.
And if you, dear listener or viewer, want to get yourself some sweet Horse Lord dice or any other dice themed to your Middle-earth armies, do check out our sponsor, who is, of course, the Baron of Dice. You can get a sweet link to those dice in the description of this video, as well as a promotional code, which will get you a 5% discount. That is capital G, capital C, capital A. Be sure to give it a use. It helps us out. It helps out the Baron, and we do appreciate it. Well, all right, so Theoden rides on with a sweet 6. Deowine, never leaving his lord behind. Chief of the King's Knights rides on behind him with a 4. But Elfhelm and Eowyn are off sightseeing and don't arrive this turn. They get a 2. Glorfindel rolls a 1, doesn't ride onto the board. Aragorn arrives on the board. Gildor, Maggot, and all of the hobbits also do not arrive this turn. They are lost on their way to Rivendell, we can only assume.
Fair enough. They stopped at the Golden Perch, Ben.
That's right, they did. They stopped at the Golden Perch. All right, so we're going to try and run through this game fairly quickly. Essentially, what happens is Aragorn and Glorfindel charge on into my big old horde of horses and do bloody butchery. When we finally get into the combats fighting with them, they kill 5 models on the turn that they charge in. They both charge into 2, call heroic combats, both win their fights. Aragorn, not having Anduril, struggled a little bit in this game. Only got 1 kill on his second go round, but Glorfindel was cleaving through my guys. My plan here was to try and I didn't really have a plan, Sam. I was here to, I think at this point, just here to roll some dice and have a good old fun time. So I just kept throwing warriors back into those 2 guys while also trying to make a point of moving my cavalry models towards Alex's board edge, but also trying to make sure that those sneaky Noldorian elves...
Exiles,
Noldorian exiles, thank you, weren't going to charge off the board with their 8-inch movements, as well as watching out for Farmer Maggot's dogs, because Aragorn had, of course, pulled some free heroic marches to help the hobbits catch up where they'd been behind. And it essentially breaks down into the middle of the board, where I managed to run past Aragorn and Glorfindel with Elfhelm and Deowine. They charge into the elves and manage to kill Gildor after Gildor put up a surprisingly good fight. Actually, I didn't expect him to be that difficult to kill. He was surprisingly tricky to kill. He managed to transfix Deowine, command Elfhelm out of the way, and then fell afoul of Durnhelm and was finally ridden down. But he was a real thorn in my side. But I did finally manage to kill him, a couple of the elves, and start to move warriors at least into the position where they could move off the board. So there's the death of Gildor. Look, he's going down. On the other flank, I sent some Royal Guard around to deal with Farmer Maggot, Merry, Pippin, Sam, Frodo, and the terrible hounds. I think they're Fang, Grip, and
Wolf, I believe.
Wolf, Fang, Grip, and Wolf.
Right. Yep. That doesn't sound right. I'll look it up.
Sam will look it up for us. So my Royal Guard threw a throwing spear at one of the dogs and killed it, and I felt terrible. I have a dog myself, and Alex was like, "Oh, you killed my puppies," and I was like, "Oh no, the dogs! Oh, I feel really bad." So we ignored them for a turn. We decided we're just going to ride past the dogs. If they attack us, we'll defend ourselves. But that was a terrible mistake, Sam. Terrible mistake. For Farmer Maggot, the four hobbits and the 2 remaining dogs charged into my flanking force here, and in a single turn, there's the flanking force at the beginning of the turn, and at the end of the turn.
Yikes.
Yeah. So Farmer Maggot and the hobbits cleaned out my royal guard. Pretty.
For those of
Pretty.
you listening, that was a flanking force of like 4 models, and
Yeah.
there's 1 left.
Yeah.
Um, I was correct. It is, or we were combined correct. It is Fang, Grip, and Wolf.
Nice.
And Ben, I would like to point out that if you're a dog owner who brought your dog to war, it deserves to die. Is all I'm saying, and certainly you do. So maybe deserved is strong, but you know.
Well, anyway, horses versus dogs. Dogs win, apparently.
Yes.
So anyway, that was like my flanking maneuver of 4 guys who were just going to roll through these hobbits and then ride off the board. And then I was like, oh no. Well, this game is all of a sudden going to be a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. So I might actually have to start playing properly. So there's the last royal guard about to get beaten to death. Farmer Maggot, with that +1 to wound, he's got a 2-handed scythe there. He doesn't care if you're in heavy armor as a royal guard. He just chops you down on 5s.
Yeah, what, strength 3 +1 to wound?
Strength 3 +1 to wound. It's not that great, but you combine him with Frodo in the ring, and now all of a sudden they outfight me. Anyway, it was hilarious watching the hobbits chop through my flank. We do manage to bring Glorfindel down this turn in one of the turns here. I think we're on about turn 6 by the time turn 7 we managed to get Glorfindel down. It takes Theoden and Daewine together. And a couple of royal guards who managed to kill Glorfindel this turn, just put through enough wounds to just flash kill him. Which leaves me just sort of riding Riders of Rohan towards the edge of the board and trying to deal with Aragorn. At this point in the game, I am out of might, and Aragorn is completely out of might. Farmer Maggot's everyone's out of might. All the might is gone, so we've just got Aragorn's free might left. And this is when Aragorn was like, okay, I'm done rolling 4s. I'm done rolling 3s. I'm going to roll nothing but 6s for the rest of the game. I outfight you. I'm going to call 3 heroic moves. And Aragorn manages to kill Theoden. I just couldn't get Theoden away from Aragorn. Aragorn manages to kill Theoden. I managed to ride 2 riders off the board. And I think Eowyn and Merry were heading for the board when we ended on time. And this was my first victory of the tournament with an 8-3 victory to me. I think I was broken, maybe. I'm not quite sure what the 3 points Alex got were. Maybe he did manage to move one of the elves off the board or one of the dogs. They were getting close to the board edge. It was a super fun game.
That wouldn't have given him points.
No, okay.
It's got to be kill the leader, and were you both broken?
It's killed the leader and both broken, yeah. So I'm broken. Yeah, super fun game.
Well, excellent.
Definitely a game that I'm actually kind of like, I could have just thrown into those dogs with all my throwing spears and then charge in the next turn and just completely obliterated them. I'm really glad I sort of pulled my punches a little bit because it made it much more of a game later on. And like an 8-3 victory felt fun. Otherwise, I mean, I know he's the ringer, he's running the tournament, he's not there to compete, but I think we both got to have a fun game, and that's the point of this, right?
Right. Yeah.
All right, onwards, Sam, ever onwards into game 4, where I was playing against Vinny, and after a veto back and forth, we ended on breakthrough.
All right, and this is into day 2, right?
Yes, this is into day 2.
After your cunning strategy of doing badly enough that you got the bed in the hotel room paid off.
Yes. So I think 4 of us ended up sharing a hotel room. We had an air mattress. Someone brought a camping mattress. Henry, who took the trouble to book the hotel room, obviously gets a bed for having done the legwork. And someone was like, "Oh, Ben should have the bed," and because he's the oldest. Apparently, I'm the oldest in the group. I'm the old man privilege. Yeah. And I was like, "No, whoever's doing the worst in the tournament should have the bed. Hail the victorious bed," I said.
Very good.
Yeah, very good. So after day 1 and only a single win, I got the bed. Brandon brought out this fantastic board game. We're not going to go onto it too much now because Sam and I need to keep this episode rolling. But if you have a chance to check out Captain Sonar, it is amazing. We had a super great time being a submarine crew and sinking each other's submarines and drinking beer between the days.
Excellent. Well, sounds like perhaps at the very least your poor record had some benefit and you got to play a fun game later as well. All right, let's talk about Breakthrough, Ben, which is, of course, a scenario from the Middle-earth Match Play Guide. And that scenario involves 4 objective markers placed, as Ben would say, like the 4 pattern on a die. So a square or diamond, desperate diamond, depending how you're looking at it. And we have a game, Ben, that has a 24-inch up deployment zone. We also have a game that lasts until one force is being reduced to 25% of its starting number. And we've got some scoring victory points. You score one victory point if there are more friendly models than enemy models within 3 inches of the objective marker in your own deployment zone. For each objective marker on the central line of the board, you score one victory point if there are more friendly models than enemy models within 3 inches of it. If there's at least one friendly and no enemy models within 3, you score 2. You score 2 victory points if there are more friendly models than enemy models within 3 inches of the objective marker in your opponent's deployment zone. If there's at least one friendly and no enemy models, instead you score 4. You score 1 victory point for causing 1 or more wounds to the enemy leader, 2 if you kill them, and 1 victory point if the enemy force is broken at the end of the game.
Nice. Nice. And Vinny brought the Corsairs of Umbar, led, of course, by Dalamir. Then we've got Dalgamar, a bosun, and a captain wielding a two-handed axe or sword or two-handed weapon. And he was Vinny's Chad captain. The Chad captain of the Corsairs, and he always two hands. He always two hands with him, even though he chooses not to. Vinny's definitely one of those players who likes to bring what he's excited about playing, not necessarily about being super competitive. He's got a bunch of black Numenorians mixed in with his Corsairs, as well as, I believe, 8 crossbows who proved their mettle this game, I will say.
Any of the soon-to-be legacied Reavers?
Oh, yes. There were many soon-to-be legacy Reavers. Who, well, we'll get into the game, Sam, but
all right.
I sent them on their way to Legacy.
Good.
All right, so I take turn 1 priority. Turns out Daewine has a heroic march. I didn't realize this. I was going into this tournament going like, oh, I don't have a heroic march. I left Gambling behind. He's got a banner and a mark. Turns out Daewine has a heroic march. So I called a heroic march with Daewine. You can see I deployed my Rohirrim in an epic battle of Pelennor Field's charge line. And despite deploying down the middle of the board, what I actually wanted to do was rush one flank, which is why I called the heroic march. We need to march over to the other flank. In the shooting phase, the crossbows, who, as you can see, are up on this terrain feature, this didn't feel great. We don't want to bang it at this point. I'm all for taking the high ground and everything, and especially when you're looking at an all cavalry force, take the high ground, go places they can't go. But putting models up here didn't feel good because there's just no way for me to get to them. They're not climbing down from there. You wouldn't climb up there in a regular game. There was a post on this on the Australian Facebook group about whether it's okay to place models in the deployment phase into a position where you couldn't normally get to them. I don't love it. Anyway.
We all know that deployment is how in Middle Earth everyone's deep striking in, or if you're a good force, the Eagles are placing every single one of you. So
oh, that's right. Yeah.
What was? Do you happen to know what the consensus of that post was? I'm curious because I didn't see that.
It was overwhelmingly, if it's a competitive tournament, it's okay.
Sure.
I checked the box saying like, nope, don't do it. It's not cool.
It's an interesting one because I agree with both sentiments. That is not something that I would do. Also because I 100% would knock those models off like 10 times and break my models. But also because it doesn't make sense. It's kind of silly. But I see the argument that you're like, if this is competitive, it should be, somebody set out this terrain like this. But then I would make the argument that it's impossible to do in Lord of the Rings. I was going to say you just put all of that stuff outside of the deployment zones, but half of the games have 24-inch up deployment zones. So yeah. It is such a funny thing. We've to have a tangent about this kind of stuff. I've been playing some Warhammer 40k second edition with a group of friends, and we're doing it next year. We do like a week of nerd gaming away, and that's going to be one of the games we're going to play is 40k second edition, which is very funny reading through old rules where you're like, wow, this is not very well designed at all. Or it's like fine, but it's not super clear or anything. And so there have been a couple of documents, like free PDFs of somebody who's like consolidated all the rules and tried to clear them up and sort some stuff out. But it has been a really interesting exercise of like we've been reading through them and being like, okay, but still, like how do we clarify some stuff that isn't clear, and like what choices can we, and basically trying to find stuff where you're like, this is a group of people we know really well, how can we create rules for like we want this to be fun and friendly and not at all competitive, but there are some people who you sort of like, even unintentionally so in the group, might like, you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, or they'll just be like, but the way I have fun is by taking the most obscene thing, so it is kind of funny, like, navigating that stuff. And I was just thinking about it, because I would be like, wow, like, as a tournament organizer, if I was running a tournament, I would now be like, do I need to tell everyone, like, you can't do, like, it's like, do you, if you're like, not that I have particularly strong feelings about this example, but if you did have really strong feelings about, you can't put your Corsairs up on like a 4-inch, or your crossbows up on a 4-inch tall, like Stonehenge looking thing that there's no way for them to get up there. Like, you either have to make that announcement or not design the terrain like that. And it's just really funny, because it's like, how much time, and like, you start thinking through, like, what am I policing everyone doing? And it's just like a very...
Yeah.
But
I think the comment I made about it during the event was like, yeah, it's fine unless you intend to try and win best sportsman, in which case...
yeah, sure. Yeah.
And if you, I guess, if you were going to do a tournament where you had a good way of doing a sportsman score, rather than just like, here, score your opponent for sportsmanship, which is always, everyone just gets like full marks, because we're all nice to each other. Well, unless you play against that one person, you're like, nope.
Right.
But, it's generally the kind of thing where you either give someone a 0 or a 5 out of 5, there's like no middle ground. I don't know.
I see. I pretty much would always give everyone like a 4 out of 5. And then if there's the one person who I'm like, holy fuck, this was amazing. No, Sportsman is hard. I do think it should be a combined score of like people submit in, and then you as the tournament organizer are just cruising around and be like, man, every time I see Ben playing, like, his opponent is always like really fucking
crying in the corner.
Right, and every time I see Sam playing, they're like, he's the greatest guy ever. It's funny, because that would be reversed. But, something like that. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's, as much as anything with that kind of stuff, it's like, there's no incentive not to do it, basically.
Right.
Unless,
and, I will say too, you're looking at these crossbows, it looks like, oh my god, there's crossbows, but you can't really see from this picture that terrain feature is kind of a C shape. So at some point, where I put my army, most of the crossbows can't see me because they're blocked by each other.
Yeah, I mean,
I quickly realized that, and I was like, okay.
We are certainly belaboring a point that I don't know if Vinny listens to the podcast or not, but it is not a thing where I'm like, this was horrible, how could you ever do that? It is just, it is more the, like, an interesting thing around it. And I think it goes into a conversation that we've sort of been having, a continuous one about, like, what is the Middle-earth community like now versus when we started playing more, and, what is playing war games, and isn't the point that we're like grown-ass adults playing with little toys? Shouldn't it just be like kind of fun for everyone? And and so, not that this isn't fun, but it's just like a sort of like evolving conversation that's interesting. It's certainly something that I think we need to have to clarify what we want to push and support in the as content creators and as a voice in the Middle-earth community when the new edition comes out. So
yeah, absolutely. And Vinny's facing an army of all cavalry, so I can't really fault him in trying to get an edge somewhere, because it looks pretty bad when you see those 26 horses on the field.
Yeah.
But anyway, onwards into the game, Sam. Before we spend entirely too much time talking about crossbowmen on fortifications, in the first round of shooting, the crossbowmen do, however, open fire into me and kill 3 of my mounted royal guard, which was like, ooh.
Yikes.
Yeah. I was like, oh, they're on the terrain feature. Oh no, they killed me.
Yeah. Points back. They got their points back. All right. So Vinny takes the next turn priority, which works out perfectly for me. I have moved my entire army off to the flank. I should say that the two centerline objectives, one of them is in the forests, so I will be leaving that one alone as a cavalry player. The other one is in some woods and in some rocky terrain formation. I asked Vinny, do you want this to be rough ground or open ground? He said it's open ground. So, definitely a sporting guide, because I gave him the opportunity to say that could be rough ground. And I know many players would have been like, you're playing all cavalry? That's rough ground. Yeah.
So definitely kudos there. And all of the Corsairs you can see over by that not rough ground. It doesn't really look like rough ground to me, so I was okay with it. But I wanted to give him the benefit to make the call. All of those guys over there are the Reavers. So Vinny takes turn 2 priority. He moves up. I charge in onto the Reavers, keep pushing my flank to the left there. And he opens fire in the shooting phase and gets another 3 kills. Unfortunately, he was just doing the quick thing, like shooting the closest model. Unfortunately, what it means is that next turn, he's killed all the models that he can charge, which was interesting. And this was just from the throwing daggers. This wasn't from the crossbows. I think the crossbows maybe got another kill. But he just completely just machine gun throwing daggers at me and then killed everyone that was within charge range, which was kind of funny. In the combat phase, I managed to kill 6 of the Reavers. Just absolutely butchered the Reavers this turn, which felt pretty good. Turn 3, priority goes to me, and we're going to move off between Dernhelm and Dalgamir. Dernhelm goes first, and we just re-engage on that flank. His captain also calls a move, so he's called 2 moves. And we re-engage on that flank. Both of us take 2 casualties this turn, and Theoden, fighting against the bosun, I believe, has to spend a point of fate and fails his fate roll. So he's fighting against the bosun, who's like, I charged. Theoden's got 3 attacks, the bosun's got 2. Theoden loses the fight against the bosun. The bosun manages to wound Theoden, fail my fate roll, take a wound. Not looking great there. Dernhelm charges into the captain with his 2-handed axe, or 2-handed sword, or whatever 2-handed weapon the captain's got. And the captain wins the fight against Dernhelm and kills Dernhelm this turn. Which was, I think I failed both of my fate rolls. He dealt 2 wounds, I flubbed both of my fate rolls. So not a good turn for fate and me this turn. Turn 4 goes to Vinny, and we get a move off between the bosun and Elfhelm. The move off goes to the bosun. He didn't get a good charge on me last turn because, like I said, he'd killed all of the guys he could charge. This turn, though, he's moved up, gets a good charge in on me, and I do manage to get some charges with some of my cavalry and decide that this is the turn that I am going to call death because we've got to call it. We've lost it. We've lost Airwin. We've lost the charge off, and I was sort of surrounded. Things weren't looking good. Things continue to not go well. I didn't win a single fight this turn.
Oof.
All of my heroes flubbed their fight rolls. I think, no, tell a lie. I won 1 fight. One of my warriors got a kill. I lost Guthlath. The king's banner bearer was brought low by Dalgamir. Theoden lost his combat to the bosun and was killed. Elfhelm lost his combat to whoever he was fighting and was killed. And Deowine just failed his heroic combat, but was A-okay. He was fine. I think he was fighting against someone who shielded or just flubbed the roll, didn't wound him. So I took 5 casualties, including my banner, Theoden, and Elfhelm this turn, and I killed 1 Corsair. And from there, even though if you look through these pictures, it kind of looks like there aren't any Corsairs over here and there are just horses everywhere. This game just fell apart. After this turn, I killed another 1. Lost 2 more and was broken. Deowine got transfixed by the smoke bombs from Dalgamir, was killed this turn, and from there I think I had like 6 cavalry models left who were not backed up by any might. I lost this one 12-0, which I just did not see coming. I was like, I had this great charge, I killed a bunch of Reavers, and then it all just completely fell apart for me. I really don't know what I would have done differently about this game. I think that I played it quite well. It just that death turn completely bubbly. Yeah, roll bad. I mean, I hate to say I lost this game because I rolled badly, but it did feel that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, every now and again you'll have a game like that. I mean, like that game that we played with my Mordor shit army against Adog, and I just got like rolled off it was,
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying I would have won the game had I rolled better, but I was definitely lost that game a lot faster than it should have been.
I don't think your orcs won a fight against my orcs.
Yeah, it was pretty...
And every time I won a fight, I killed an orc.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
I do think it was hilarious that the Corsair Reaver Bosun, who is, of course, Peter Jackson in the films, was the one that killed Theoden. It's just something funny about, like, Peter Jackson will be unstoppable!
Stabbed him in the eye with a carrot, I imagine.
Put his shoes on and like actually showed up.
The carrot-eating villager in Bree.
Oh, that's right, he is.
Which I think is technically the Hobbit movies, but anyway.
Whatever. So yeah, totally didn't see that coming. Had a good time, but was a little bit. It definitely got one-sided towards the end, which sometimes these games do. Which brings us, Sam, onto the fifth and final round. In round 3, everybody except myself and Alex got a tie. Like literally every single other table tied.
Wow.
So because it just like, there were 12 of us, I think, at this event, Alex decided that we were just going to repair round 3, and we were going to have a proper round 3 off to see who would win, which meant that I played Alex again for round 3.
So it wasn't. I know you said we talked about this, and you said there were re-recs. I had assumed it was based on ranking. It was like.
It was, but it also just happened that everyone who had played each other in round 3 repaired.
Gotcha. Okay. As long as it was based on ranking and not just like, oh, we're gonna have re-recs, let's just redo this one.
No, it was also based on rankings, and it was just hilarious that everyone tied on round 3.
Yeah, I mean,
so Alex and I were playing again.
Yeah. I mean, I think with small tournaments, if you've got enough games where you're gonna have re-recs, you should just do it based. If you've got enough games that everyone's not going to play somebody different. Like you should never be in a situation like we've been in a couple of events where you're like first place is playing like 7th, just because first doesn't want to play second again, and you're kind of like, well, maybe you need to change the war gamer you are to.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you there, Sam. Yeah, and I understand, like, re-racks aren't always great. I must admit, as much fun as I had playing against Alex, I wasn't super thrilled to play this for my final round of the event, because I knew that our game was going to get done in an hour, and, you know.
Yeah, and it's not a real army. Like, it's an okay concept, but it's not a real, it could go, it'll either, I don't know, it feels like either those big heroes or all those heroes will run through you, or you'll like just run over the army. And
yeah, I'm fairly sure the only game that Alex won this event was actually against Vinny, and I'm pretty sure that Vinny just got rolled off the board. Like, he just didn't roll. And from what I hear,
Yeah, there was no thing to put his Corsair crossbows up on top of. So
no, and Aragorn and Glorfindel just like killed 30 Corsairs each or something.
Yeah. All right,
we were playing Retrieval.
Yes, scenario 14, Retrieval with a weird deployment zone. So you've got 2 relics on this board that come on opposite table corners, 15 inches up, and then across the long diagonal. I guess the diagonals would be the same. Across one of the diagonal, you've got a 6-inch no man's land, basically, and then the rest, so 3 inches off that center line is your deployment zone. We've got a game that ends after a force has been broken on a 1 or a 2. We've got some special rules we'll go into first, and that is the relic. Each relic is a light object. A relic is considered to have been retrieved if at the end of the game it has been carried by a friendly model. If it is being carried by a friendly model. If the relic has been picked up by the enemy model and subsequently dropped or Sorry, I should read this again. A relic is considered to have been retrieved if at the end of the game it is being carried by a friendly model. If a relic has been picked up by an enemy model and is then subsequently dropped or retaken by a friendly model, then the player must try and return it to its original position as quickly as possible. Until it has been picked up by an enemy model, friendly models cannot pick up their own relic. Alright, that's wordy and weird. You score 1 victory point if your opponent's relic has been moved from its original position at the end of the game. If you have retrieved your opponent's relic, instead you score 3 victory points. If you've retrieved your opponent's relic and the model holding it is in your deployment zone, instead you score 5 victory points. If you have retrieved your opponent's relic and managed to move it off the board via either of the table edges in your deployment zone, instead you score 7 victory points. You score 1 victory point for causing 1 or more wounds to the enemy leader, 2 if you kill them, 1 victory point if the enemy force is broken. If the enemy force is broken, then yours is unbroken. Instead, you score 3 victory points. There we go. So, go pick up the opponent's relic and get it off one of your board edges.
Right, feels pretty good when you got 26 cavalry models and outnumber your opponent.
And they're all expert rider, right? So
they're all expert rider.
They can all pick it up on horseback.
And we were playing on this awesome Barrow Downs table. A lot of the tables at this event were brought in by the community. Some were Alex's tables. His Lake Town board, which I should mention was the board that we played on in round 3, looks absolutely amazing. He's done the snow on it. Looks great. But this was, I think, probably one of my favorite boards there. It was just this really cool fog on the Barrow Downs board. There's something about it that looked really good. So we're going to get right on into it. Obviously, this game is going to turn into Glorfindel and Aragorn trying to steal my relic, pretty much, while I try and chop through all the elves who are guarding Alex's relic. I take turn 1 priority. Frodo puts on the ring. I rush all the cavalry forwards, and I'm not quite sure what I was thinking. I think I was thinking I'm going to bait Aragorn and see if I can burn some stats off of him. Anyway, Aragorn gets to charge in this turn, calls a free heroic combat, which he completely flubs. Excuse me. However, I failed to even kill his horse off the rebuttal from him flubbing the combat. So, whatever.
What are you going to do?
Indeed, what are you going to do? So, in turn 2, priority goes to Alex. I decide that's fine. Go ahead and move. I will move after you. Aragorn and Glorfindel charge on in. In fact, I don't know if Glorfindel did. He may have just gone on a big round the flank maneuver. Sam, Merry, Pippin, and Frodo are also advancing on my relic, interestingly enough, which leaves Farmer Maggot, the dogs, and the elves to guard Alex's relic. In the combat phase, Aragorn calls another free heroic combat and kills 2 riders, and then moves on and kills a 3rd rider. I managed to kill 2 of the elves with shooting this turn. Just chucking throwing spears into defense 3 models feels great.
Yeah.
In turn 3, we get into the strike-off. So I have left Elfhelm and Durnhelm behind to guard my relic, Theoden and Deowine, and most of my riders are leading the charge to get Alex's relic. So Alex takes priority on turn 3, and he charges into Elfhelm and Durnhelm with Glorfindel. We get the strike off this turn, which I win the strike off. I take 2 wounds and 3 points of fate off of Glorfindel. I probably should have tried to kill Asphalov, honestly.
Dang.
I didn't. I was going for the leader kill. Which is, it's good stuff. Elsewhere, I think Theoden and his horse guys charge on into the elves there, and we get some kills. We get 2 or 3 kills this turn. Next turn, we get a rather important move off between Sam and Eowyn, and Sam wins the move off, which frees up Aragorn to charge into Durnhelm, Eowyn, and Elfhelm. Glorfindel charges into one of the riders that I've got over there, and Sam, I think, just charges into a random rider as well. And there's, of course, Theoden charges into Farmer Maggot. Vengeance. Farmer Maggot's dogs killed my riders last round. There will be no remorse this turn. We're going to kill all the dogs this time, Sam. We're just going to ride them down. We can't risk it. So Theoden kills Farmer Maggot this turn. I believe Deowine just rides down Gildor this turn. Sam loses a point of fate this turn. Aragorn is fighting against Eowyn. We get a strike off there. Eowyn wins the strike off, and we kill Aragorn's horse. And Glorfindel calls a heroic combat, kills the rider that he's fighting, picks up my relic, and starts to ride for the board edge. And over the next couple of turns, that's essentially what this game turns into. It's like, can I catch the movement 12 horse with Fleetfoot as it rides towards the board edge? Can I get the relic that is being surrounded by elves? Can I chop my way through and pick it up? So Theoden calls death. Deowine and Theoden manage to mop up the rest of the elves and pick up the relic and start riding it back towards my board edge. I got 1 turn. You can see Glorfindel there. He's riding towards Alex's board edge. And this particular picture, he's 25 inches from the board edge, so there are 3 turns of me chasing him, firing every single bow that I have and throwing all of my throwing spears at him, like in this desperate attempt to catch Glorfindel. I think the closest I got is I got a hit with a guy. He moves. He needs to hit on 5s. He hit Asphalov, on the horse or rider roll. He's out of fate at this point. He's spent all his fate. He's down to 1 wound. I mean, I could have even killed Glorfindel and then just flubbed the wound roll. Didn't get it. It was this like, and this one shook out to be a 7-5 victory for me. Glorfindel didn't quite manage to ride off the board before this game ended on game conditions.
Ah, nice.
So I had the relic in my half, in my deployment zone. He had the relic in his deployment zone. He was broken. I was not broken.
Gotcha. Shouldn't that... Is that not...
I'm just guessing. I have 7-5 written down, which is certainly the right score.
So he had it in his deployment zone. You must have retrieved it, but not in the deployment zone. 1 wound on the enemy leader, and you were both broken?
Yeah, maybe that sounds right.
because that's 1 point.
No, I don't think I was. I don't think I was broken. I
Well,
took like.
oh no, that's true. Sorry, I was thinking. Yeah, that would be right. You got 3 for the break and 1 for the leader wound and 3 for the relic. He got 5 for the relic.
Yeah. So I had the relic in his deployment zone. Yeah. Super fun game. Again, like one that I went into like feeling very confident, and then Glorfindel and Aragon just like showed up and like tearing through stuff. And I think Alex walked over to Henry, who played in the previous round, was like, Henry, that's how you play against the Ringer. You give him a fighting chance and make it a close game.
Very good.
Henry had the Black Gate opens with 3 trolls, and I think Aragorn and Glorfindel did not do so well against the trolls.
That's fair enough. Well, so Ben, do you want to tell us how the event all shook out, how it wrapped up?
I will. How did it all wrap up? I didn't pull down the placings. I should have pulled down the placings. I believe my friend Ian from Maine took home first place.
Oh, yeah, because you said he had Aragon, King of Lesser, and Eonor, last King of Gondor.
In his defense, he was calling it a 4th Age army.
The dude's not even it. What?
Well, I think it was supposed to be Aragorn, his son, and someone else. I forget. Anyway. Yeah, he really did quite well with it. Ian also took home Best Painted with that army. We had a 3-way tie for Best Painted, which was hysterical. Alex was like, I hate to choose these things. Everyone just vote. And I was like, oh, I forgot to cast my vote. Let me vote. And he was like, okay, great. And the person before me had turned in their vote and was like, perfect. That splits the tie. I turned my vote in and turned it back into a tie, which I thought was hysterical.
Excellent.
So Ian took home first place and Best Painted. Matt Iverson took second place. And who took third? I forget who took third. I am so sorry to whoever took third. I've forgotten you.
Oh, well.
Yeah. And then I did take some pictures of the armies on display. So here's my army on display at the Rohan board. We've seen pictures of my army already. Looks very cool.
You got to finish that one base up front.
Yeah, I do. You're right. That's Ian's army, which took home Best Painted. It does look very nice. He's been working really hard on his painting. Actually, it's really cool to see how far he's come along since I first met him.
Those upscaled 3D prints still crack me up, man.
They are pretty. They're big.
Like taller than Eonor. Is that Eonor in the middle? No.
Yeah, I think it is. I'm pretty sure it is because the mounted LSR sculpt he was using is not in there.
Yeah, it cracks me up. Like whatever, but it makes me laugh.
I also took some pictures. This is Jimmy's army. I thought this looked really good.
Oh, nice, very cool.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of. I like to just stick to the books for theme and for painting and stuff. But it is cool to see Minas Tirith done in something other than black and silver.
Yeah, sure.
I think the burgundy looks really nice. And then I also took a picture of Henry's troll. I just love the conversion. It just looks like the troll busting through the gates of Minas Tirith. He's got some work to do on the painting there. I think he was working on this guy the night before.
Nice.
He's just trying to get him done. Coffee grounds on the base kind of thing. But I just think he nailed the conversion for reposing the troll.
Sweet.
Thought it was worth sharing. And then there's Matt Iverson's army. I think something that people don't appreciate about Matt is that he can actually paint. There's a lot of like top table players who can't paint well, and he tends to get glossed over for best painting stuff because he's usually doing so well in the tournament. People are like, I'm not going to vote for him because he's going to win the tournament. So I thought it's worth a shout out.
No, it looks sweet.
Stuff looks nice.
One of the things I appreciate about Matt is that I think he's one of the only one of 2 people I know who has a legitimate Beyonding army. Yeah.
And then this was Cody, one of our players, entered this Gimli at the convention painting competition and took first place, best painted at the single miniature painting competition. So I thought that was worth shouting out.
Oh yeah,
get a picture there. But yeah, Sam, that was the event. I had an absolute blast, super fun time. I now have a second favorite game, and it's called Captain Sonar. It is awesome. I encourage you guys to check it out.
We're not sponsored, not affiliated in any way.
But, if you ever feel like 7 of your friends and you could crew some submarines, have a good time. It's a great game.
Excellent. All right, Ben. So that wraps up the coverage for this episode. Do you have any plans of where you'll be next? And
I do not, Sam. I have no events scheduled. There's a game day in Connecticut on November 17th, but I don't really feel like driving 6 hours down to Connecticut for a game day.
Yeah, I'm now unsure about the event I was going to go to in December. The Shorehammer event has recently had a bunch of stuff change, including its day and time, I believe. One of the things I do remember is it has now removed the restriction on named heroes, so you can now take named heroes because they said flat out, we're not using the new rules no matter when they come out. Which probably, like, even if they had anyway. So the idea being like, and a bunch of this stuff may be going away or changing. So, like, get your last hurrah in kind of thing. But certainly if the new rules are out by then, I probably won't go. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it now with the change of time or if I'll be motivated to go. So I don't know when the next one I will be at either is. Which does leave the question as to what are we going to be doing for episodes over the next few weeks and months while a new edition is released.
That's a good question, Sam. I'm sure we'll figure something out.
Yeah, I'm sure we will too. I have not marked down the dates. Yeah, so probably look for some non-tournament coverage, non-standard episodes coming up in the future.
All right.
And with that, shall we end it, Ben, or is there anything else you would like to say?
No, I just want to give a shout out to our Patreons. We didn't give you a thank you this episode. We really do appreciate you guys. You keep the lights on here at Gondor Calls for Ale.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And if you're not a Patreon, please consider checking it out. If you are a Patreon or are not a Patreon and haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please consider doing that and, give a like and whatever, all of that stuff. All right. Well, until next time, we appreciate you watching and listening to us, and we will be back in 2 short weeks. Thank you for listening to Gondor Calls for Ale. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. We, at Gondor Calls for Ale, are officially sponsored by the Baron of Dice, the producer of premium wargaming dice. These beautifully hand-swirled resin dice have no microbubbles and are therefore perfectly balanced. With over 3,000 variants and unique designs, nearly every tabletop gaming system is represented. So check out the description of this episode for a link and a discount code. Go buy yourself some new dice and let the good times roll. We at Gondor Calls for Ale are not associated with Games Workshop, New Line Cinema, or the Tolkien Estate. We hope we have not misrepresented or offended anyone. These recordings are strictly recollections of games we've played and are not commentaries on the character or competence of our opponents. They are intended purely for entertainment, and we hope they will be taken as such. You can find us on Patreon, see the link in the description. Supporting Gondor Calls for Ale there helps us continue to produce these episodes. You can find us on Instagram at Gondor_calls_for_ale. Feel free to send us a message there. Or on Facebook as Gondor Calls for Ale, another great place to send us a message. Or you can send us an email at gondorcallsforale@gmail.com. As Boromir, Captain of the White Tower, once said, remember today, listener, today this episode was good.